Welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. And this week, it's good to be the king. Cue the music! Hello there, capers, and as I said, welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. My name's Scott James Merridew, and this is the show where we talk about various geek and nerd-related topics, and I'm joined each week by a very special different guest. I have two very special guests here with me this week. They are Fred Van Lente and Crystal Skillman. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic.
Fred, I just realized I did not check how your name was pronounced before we started, because I am an arsehole. Was that correct?
You nailed it. Beginner's luck.
Oh, thank God. Can you believe I've been doing this for over 170 episodes? My God, I'm so professional. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Pretty great. Yeah. Snowed in here in Brooklyn.
I was going to ask where you're from. Oh, yeah, because you've got snow up there.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
God.
Well, now
we
it's
had
rain.
snow. Oh, now it's
well, now it's turning into the classic New York City gray sludge.
Ugh.
At the moment.
Hey, we don't have that over here. We had snow for a little bit, then we had ice, and then we had nothing but ice. I could have skated to places I needed to go if I ever had anywhere to go. Anyway, now the reason why I could complain about the British weather, but I feel like that's been done, you know?
I've heard it said.
So,
I feel like every time I've been in Britain, it's been spectacular weather. So I guess I've just been lucky.
You have been lucky.
I'm sorry, what genie's lamp did you find that may allowed you to wish for good weather when you came to Britain? How did you manage that?
The sun followed me, I suppose. Not that the weather's always 100% great here either, but I got lucky, I guess.
I mean, come on, in New York, the sun is always shining. At least that's what the musicals keep telling me.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Anyway, we're going to talk about you guys and your fantastic work of art, King Kirby, in just a moment. But before we do that, we've got to talk about the news! I really like that sound effect, don't at me. Anyway, a bunch of news for you, but some slightly lighter stuff, followed by some kind of heavy stuff. Brace yourselves. First of all, two new big trailers have dropped. The first one being Mortal Kombat 2021. Have you guys seen this trailer?
I have.
I haven't.
I saw the original in the theater. I played the soundtrack incessantly.
I mean, it's a good soundtrack. Good. Why wouldn't you?
It's an amazing soundtrack.
But this new trailer, the trailer's nuts. I mean, it's Mortal Kombat, but it's nuts.
I agree. In a good way, though, I think.
Now I can't wait to go watch it.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's... I mean, it's Mortal Kombat. I've been playing... I played Mortal Kombat till the... Hey, that's no problem. That's fine.
Or
but I like Mortal Kombat.
Street Combat. What was it? Marvel Capcom.
Yeah, we did play a lot of Marvel versus Capcom too.
Yeah, we like that too. But that theme song, Sub-Zero.
Well, the new movie makes the first movie just like, as someone said, the first movie is a bit of an Enter the Dragon knockoff. Not that it's the only Enter the Dragon knockoff in martial arts film cinematic history, but this one just leans very heavily into these superpowers, cosmic magic, monsters, bananas, insanity,
which fits the times we're in,
and I liked it.
Pretty much.
Yeah, well, it's great that we're in a realm now where this crazy comic book stuff is sort of considered, bankable, right? And sort of something people can handle. I mean, I remember dealing even 20 years ago with Hollywood producers who just didn't understand why there were superpowers. Like, you needed like some cosmic explanation as to why there were superpowers. Now it's just like,
they got it.
It's just sort of, there's people with superpowers. Deal with it, like we don't need to explain it.
Keep up, come on.
It's just happening, Guy gets his arms ripped off. Guy gets his arm ripped off by Sub-Zero, and then he gets new mechanical arms shoved on. And he didn't die, and he got new mechanical arms shoved on his regular arms. Sure.
And as a nitpicky
Roll with
fan,
it, nerds.
I would call bullshit on that, because as I recall, Jack's got his arms ripped off by Ermac, not Sub-Zero. So instant fail, movie over for me.
Dislike.
KO.
Finish him.
Fatality! You lose. Anyway, moving on from Mortal Kombat, something that I find infinitely more interesting is a strong word. There's a new trailer for the Disney live-action Cruella movie.
Here's me on the scale of caring. I'm at 0.
Yeah, I don't... Like, it looks cool, but we've been burned before by live-action Disney movies. It's... I refuse to be suckered in again.
So here's what I don't understand about the Cruella thing. Here's what I don't understand about the Cruella thing is that in 101 Dalmatians, her plan,
the live action or the animated?
In both.
Okay.
Her plan is to murder a bunch of puppies.
Yeah.
So in Cruella, do we find out she started out murdering adult dogs? Like, did she murder squirrels? Like how is she gonna? How is this prequel going to lead us to a better understanding of her character?
We never really get the inciting incident where it's never explained. You know, she already has great coats, and it's never explained why she suddenly
moved from jackets to coats. Like, she used to have jackets, and Cruella will find out
why. Because her, the other, it doesn't establish like the fox coats and the other things she was wearing that she went out and personally killed them. So this would be the first time, or if she had a history of doing that, they don't really make that clear.
Is there a -1 on your caring scale? Can I be there?
The thing is with caring,
she does have the greatest theme song.
Well, yes, she's got it. All the villains have good theme songs, but the problem with the whole caring scale thing, -1, seeing that caring and not caring are two sides of the same coin, same as love as hate. Negative caring is in fact positive caring in a certain kind of way, so it kind of all breaks down after that.
I retract my comment then.
No, but here's the thing. What I want out of Cruella, bear in mind I don't want anything because I have zero expectations, is I want a great understanding into the personality, what drives her motivation and what makes her think, oh yeah, murdering a bunch of dogs for fashion is in fact perfectly acceptable, and indeed it's artistic creativity. I don't think we're going to get that. What I'm going to think is Emma Stone. I got my Emmas confused there. I nearly called Emma Watson for a second. It's a completely different Emma. Emma Stone, not mugging at the camera, but having a good time in front of the camera, or while they show her like the fashion side of it and not so much her own personal motivations. And I think if they explore her personal motivations, then that might be interesting, but it's Disney. They've taken better concepts and ruined them before, so I'm not a fan. Can you tell that I'm not a fan? Anyway.
Yeah, I've only seen a couple of the Disney live-action remakes and just not impressed.
Yeah, it's really, it's just kind of like all the, even the ones that are a little better, the pace is really off. It's either too manic or too slow. It's very difficult to get into. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there might be one live action.
I mean, you mentioned earlier the 101 Dalmatian live action movies. Both of them I actually thought were pretty good.
Yeah.
Maybe because the first one, at least I know, was directed by John Hughes, and he was good at what he did. And, you can't go wrong with Glenn Close. Put her in the movie, automatically better.
You cannot.
It's just
You cannot. And in fact, and I don't know if it's going back to I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Broadway production of that in the works at some point in our lives.
No,
even though it's impossible with all those dogs on stage, they'll figure it out. Like The Lion King.
Yeah. You know what?
Sorry, I was... If Cruella could take care of this cat that keeps trying to walk on the laptop and disrupt this interview,
this cat would take
Emma Stone.
We have a cat that is really a demon. He's gone across my laptop and 666 has come up.
Now he's biting me.
People have come into our apartment that have said, I can sense his power. He's El Diablo. He's got, he would take care of Cruella. He would take care of Cruella.
That's right. She would meet her match.
Well, looks like the shoes on the other paw there, Devil. Anyway, we're going to move on now and talk about another trailer that's dropped out, this time in the video game world. Star Wars Hunters, a brand new Star Wars game, is on the horizon. It's going to be a while until we get it. It is a free-to-play competitive arena video game from Natural Motion and Boss Alien. And it's scheduled for release in late 2021. There is a trailer out for it, and it's going to be released on mobile devices and Nintendo Switch. And you know what that means. Microtransactions!
We've got to have money.
The red flags are there, people. I'm not a fan of arena shooters in general, but it screams that they just want to drain people's wallets. We did not go through all the crap we've gone through with EA just to start all over again. I mean, do you guys play these sort of video games?
Not the Star Wars video game. I'm playing Hitman 3 right now.
They're good things.
And loving it. I'm also not a Star Wars. Like, the last Star Wars game I played and liked was Dark Forces. So it's been
That's a classic. That's a good one. I came to a bit later than that, but it's been a saga. Let me put it this way. The Star Wars games recently have been a saga, ups and downs, and this does not look like a positive step forward. But you know what? I'll reserve judgment. I'm just saying the trailer looks worrying, but not nearly as worrying as a new announcement in the video game world. There has been... this is a story that goes back all the way to 2009. You see, there was this video game publisher who worked with Konami to develop this game called 6 Days in Fallujah. Have you guys heard of this?
No.
So it's set during around the Second Battle of Fallujah. You know, that time when American forces and British forces committed all those war crimes. Remember, you guys, all the war crimes that happened over there?
Yep.
Well, it's set during that, which... you might think, okay, that sounds bad, but video games like Spec Ops: The Line and other similar games have talked about the horrors of war and the true impact it can have on civilians in war zones. So maybe this will be like that. Wrong, mother lovers! It is a pure sanitized sort of modern day shooter. And because of the vast amounts of controversy, I mean, the Stop the War Coalition over here in the UK was very vocal against it. So Konami basically said, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. And it was shuffled into the back pages of the annals of controversial video game history. Until recently, because now... the video game is coming back. It's going to be released again without Konami. And they specifically said, we are not going to focus on the atrocities. This was immediately met by the biggest...
Dear God.
There's more.
No.
From the entire video game community. Everyone basically said, what the hell are you thinking? And now everyone is talking about it. I'm not going to go into huge detail because I don't have the full historical context. Like, when this was happening, I was a kid, I was a teenager, so I wasn't as aware of as many other people would have been. And also, I'm going to leave the huge video game criticism up to video game critics. I know my role and I'm going to stick to it. But I just want to talk about it because it still surprises me, and it takes a lot to surprise me these days, the sheer amount of a lack of awareness some people, both in the video game industry and the film industry and in any sort of creative industry, have over stuff like this. I mean, as Americans, what do you guys think?
Well, it just what we've been living in 4 years of of terrifying times we've just come out of. So talk about, taking lightly war crimes and everything going on. I can't even imagine, because we're still trying to figure out what reality is here on many levels. And
well, it's also weird because the connotation of the Fallujah has in the United States is the soldiers who got strung up, on the bridge and sort of in retaliation for
those private defense contractors.
So it's almost like it's like someone deciding to make a movie about Little Bighorn or something. Like, it's not often you do a video game of a battle the country trying to sell to lost. very odd sort of, I don't quite get. It's one of those things where you ask, who is the market for this game? Like the Iraq War has like 20 to 30% approval ratings in the US. So it's like, who's asking for this, other than gun nuts and, raw war lovers.
Well, the lead,
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
The lead developer for 6 Days of Fallujah is this guy. I can't remember his first name. I've got it written down here somewhere. Peter Tamte, and he apparently used to work with the military and was very close to people who were involved in those events. So maybe he's making it for his friends. Who knows?
Rewriting history, video game form,
and that you hit the nail on the head there. Rewriting history. I've talked about this before. When you portray historical events, you either need to say this is nothing like what happened, or you need to portray what actually happened. Especially with the last one, and otherwise, people
based on a true story does a lot of heavy lifting. The phrase.
Oh God, yeah. And my biggest fear is that people who are completely ignorant, like me, I'll admit I don't know a lot about what happened over there, but what I do know terrifies me. But I might, or someone like me, might look at a game like that or a movie like that to think, oh, that's what happened. And it's not! So people out there who may be considering doing similar projects or indeed that project, stop it. Just stop it. And obviously, seeing as how everyone listens to this podcast, my voice will immediately be heard and development of the video game will be shut down. It's a certainty at this point. Anyway, that was the news. Now we're going to move on to something that I can actually want to talk about. King Kirby! Oh my God, guys.
Yes.
So, briefly, before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this episode, could you guys please explain what King Kirby actually is?
King Kirby is an audio drama based on the play that we wrote about the life of Jack Kirby. And it follows him from a very young age, and he really takes place all, throughout his whole life. The audio drama is broken up into 4, really great episodes with these great cliffhangers, but it's all true. It's his life and what he experienced. We take the particular angle that he was an artist who didn't get his due in co-creating the Marvel Universe, which is something that as the episodes go on become clearer as we realize he started in a time where we didn't even know there wasn't even the term comic books yet. So he was really there on the forefront of this being birthed. He was like an artist no one's seen before. He still claimed to be the king, one of the most prolific comic book artists we've ever seen. And he meets Stan Lee pretty early on, almost as an assistant. And when that relationship comes back in later episodes, we see where that all goes and why you know Stan's name more than you know Jack Kirby's name. And that's what the piece explores.
I mean, it's a 4-episode audio drama, right?
Yep.
So only 2 episodes are out so far that I've been able to listen to at least. And honestly, it's been kind of a through ride because I think what you've done here, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, a lot of biopics, whether they be audio format or on the stage or on the screen, is they introduce the audience to the main characters, this figure's world. I think what you guys have done is not really put him in his world so much as in Jack Kirby's world view. He's almost right inside his head, which is something you can really do in audio. It's you give a little fist bump there, like, oh yes, we got it. It came across. Hooray.
We hooked him.
You did. My God, you did. It's a lot of it's down to the writing, obviously, and the vocal performances, which are phenomenal. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But also just the sound design, the sound mixing, everything. I'm just sort of like, okay, all right, it's starting. Oh, a little at the beginning. Okay, let's go. Whoa! And then I'm in Jack Kirby's head. It's just like, why am I here? I was in my parents' house in Oxfordshire, and now I'm in Jack Kirby's head. This is a weird Tuesday for me. So it's an awful lot of fun, and we're going to talk about just how fun it is in a moment. Before we do, we need to do a little bit of backstory, not so much on Jack Kirby, but on your good selves. Crystal, let's start with you. So you've been working in theatre for quite a while, correct?
Yes, what they call a downtown baby. I've been produced a lot downtown and great midtown theaters like the Tank, and now I'm a member of theaters like Playwright Center, and working with Broadway producers on musicals. So it's been a long, varied life of writing different pieces that are either plays with music, or musicals. And so I've always wanted to tell stories in the right medium in which they are to be told. So it's only in the past 5 years I've been writing more television and audio drama, and now comic books. So because Fred and I have a comic book called Eat Fighter on Webtoon. And I just love it. So I really consider myself a dramatist, but also has a writer-like approach. So I am a playwright, but I like to use that skill in writing different mediums.
And a lot of the stuff you've done, like you say, you have experience with so many different mediums, but a lot of them have been transformative in a way, because you've done, straight up plays, you've done musicals, but you've also done adaptions of previous works into musicals or plays, which is very hard to do from my perspective, because I've seen plays be adapted to movies, and they end up being very specific kind of movies. The two I can really point out off the top of my head is the play later, the film Fences, which we'll all have heard of, and also this other one from way back when called The Bad Seed, which is sort of started the whole child serial killer trope, that fun, family-friendly idea. And when you look at the movies that are based on those plays, The Bad Seed initially started off as a book as well, they're staged very uniquely, they're blocked very uniquely. And so I always find it fascinating, and admittedly I haven't seen many examples of this, when you take something from a visual medium like a film, specifically I'm talking about Mary and Max, and transform that to the stage.
Yes, it's an incredible, and also your viewers and listeners I know are worldwide, but Mary Max has a huge following in the UK and a huge following overseas, and Scotland as well. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Mary Max is a claymated black and white, very unusual film by
It's
Adam
unusual
Elliott.
in the mainstream. I've seen a ton of independent films
Yeah.
like that.
Yes, it's very quirky. It's very detail oriented. It's very moving. It has one of the strongest endings of a film I've ever seen, and it's very emotional about the connection between these two unlikely friends. One being a young girl in New York, and one being this older gentleman who turns out to have Asperger's in New York City. And so it's a plot that is full of detail. It is a plot that has no plot. And by it having no plot and is character driven, it's so riveting. But one wrong misstep and it could be like plays we've seen before. They're good plays, but like love letters or reading different letters because they write letters to one another. And so what we really wanted to do is say, okay, we're not going to take the movie and put it on stage. We're going to say what is the essence of these scenes and these moments. And so there's a lot of my own work and full scenes that are in the piece. Probably the biggest thing that we've done that audiences seem to be excited about when it just happened in Austria and it's just gotten options. So we'll be talking in terms of New York and America and where it goes from here. But I created and Bobby Cronin, but I wrote this framing device where a father is telling his daughter the story. She won't come out of her room, and she's locked her room. And it's the day of her mother's celebration of her life because she's passed. And so there's this kind of urgency in connection in the modern story as the story's unfolding and you discover why he's telling the story. So it was just so cool that Adam Elliott is such a great creator, and the producer as well that he works with just were game. They loved Bobby Cronin's music. They trusted us, and they wanted something creative and artistic. So that's very rare. I've yet to work on a movie musical that is much more interested in putting the movie on stage. I'm not sure I would. I have auditioned for those moments, and there's not a lot of license there because they want that movie on stage. And so that's very limiting, and that becomes more like a jukebox musical, and jukebox musicals sell, but they don't last forever in the same way. And they certainly, they don't really last in the culture the same way because you could just listen to the album, honestly.
Moulin Rouge is overrated.
It's overrated. Maybe sorry to geek out there, but the last thing I'll say is maybe the only one that I've heard of that the book people just love that scene work is the Jersey Boys, and I feel like that really enhances.
Oh, yeah.
I have yet though to see the Temptations musical, that Dominic Moroso wrote. The name will come to me. It will be coming back to
that
Broadway.
thing you do
very well. I heard great things about that. No, not that you can do. It was it's escaping me. Ain't Too Proud. Heard really great things about that. And it was definitely on my list. As you know, right now we're a little frozen. So we'll have to see it when it comes back.
Yeah, but good news for UK theatre fans, because it's just been announced that lockdown is going to be easing up, and you should be able to go back to the theatres in the UK, or at the very least in England, in early June. So that's good news for people who could do that.
And I love hearing you say that. I love hearing you say that. The same producers that have optioned Mary Max have optioned my play Rain and Zoe Save the World, which is a play with the music by Bobby Cronin, and it's about two teenagers.
His name just keeps coming up.
It's also involved with King Kirby. But it looks like they are talking to UK theaters here. So we are very close to nailing a slot, probably in 2022, maybe even in the fall. And so we will be over in the UK pretty soon for the production of that new play.
Keep an eye out, Theatre Bus. So now we need to go on to Fred. Now, Fred, I'm afraid I must admonish you, because you wrote, you created with Dennis Calero, X-Men Noir. And that is a very, very good comic that introduced 17-year-old me to BDSM. How dare you?
You're welcome.
Don't keep
That was our intention. That was our intention, though. I thought that's the whole purpose of comics, was to introduce teenagers to BDSM.
I mean, that's where my childhood died.
That was in the sequel. That was the Mark of Cain, right? That was the sequel where.
The
White Queen she's the prison warden, and likes tying up the prisoners and being tied up. It's true. Well, look at her out. I mean, come on.
I wish we could show the original art on your wall.
Yes, I have the right to my.
Could you pick
my right? No, I'm not picking it up. Anyway, I have the original. So Dennis gave me the original cover to X-Men Noir #3.
It's gorgeous.
Which is Rogue. It's right up here.
Hey, it's gorgeous artwork.
It's kind of mounted pretty securely.
But that is just the tip of the iceberg for all the work you do. I'm looking at your credits right now. My God, man, you're a busy man.
Got to pay the bills.
You got to pay the bills. I mean, we could go on and on about all the work you've done on Marvel Zombies, Cowboy vs. Aliens, The Silencers, some recent stuff with Valiant Comics. So you like writing comics then?
I do. If I hated it, that would kind of suck, because I do it a lot. But I do, in fact, enjoy it quite a bit.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it, because I'm one of those writers that ends up hating his own stuff. I just like, wow, I'm so awful. All of this is just awful. So I'm glad you don't have the same
there's a percentage of stuff that I kind of like. Sometimes you just take jobs for, money, and you can't really find your way into it, but you do it anyway, because otherwise you'd have to quit and not get a paycheck. But fortunately, those have been in the minority for me.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. Good. That's important, because you got to keep your writers and artists happy, satisfied. Exactly.
That's right.
But which brings me to my next question. How exactly then did you get involved with King Kirby? How did that come about?
Well, King Kirby predates my going pro as a comics fan, or comics creator, rather. I've been a comics fan since I was essentially 4 years old. But I was fascinated by the story of Jack, and started writing a biography about him just on my own. This is even really before I had really become a full-time comics pro. And I was dating Crystal at the time. We were just boyfriend-girlfriend at that point, before we made it legal and got married.
We were living together.
We were living together at the time. That's true. And I was like, Crystal can write plays. I want to write a play. I'm going to do a play. Let's do a play. Living. That's right.
We were living in.
And I did a version of the play that was, it was good. It wasn't terrible, but we had a reading of it. But at that point, this would have been 2001, 2002, pre, the MCU and a lot of sort of, people would have been like,
the Dark
WandaVision,
Ages.
the hell are you talking about? Yeah. And so we got stuck in a drawer until about a decade later when the Brick Theater here in New York decided to do a comic book theater festival. And Chris was like, hey, remember that King Kirby play you wrote? And so we dusted it off, and Crystal made a bunch of changes to the point where I was like, you're the co-writer. And together we got the production up. And in fact, that original cast is who you hear on the podcast.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to talking about them. But I also want to mention, didn't you have a Kickstarter for it at some point, for the play?
We did. Yeah. We did. That original production was financed through Kickstarter backers, and we had Kickstarter backers from all over the world. I think the furthest was Israel. We had some in Brazil, plenty in the UK, and continental Europe. And we wanted to give people obviously none of those people could actually come and see the show in New York. So we wanted to give them something of the show to sort of, in gratitude. And because of our union rules here in New York, which I fully support, big union guy over here, we were not allowed to film the show. But that's right. But we were allowed to take a dub it on audio, and so we actually did that in a comic book store of all places. In Midtown Comics graciously agreed to host us, and that became our Kickstarter reward. And that audio that was shot in Midtown is the basis for what you hear right now on the podcast that's currently available.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey. Now, I'm glad that I got to... I mean, as much as I would have liked to see the play, I am glad I get to listen to it in audio podcast format, because I'm not a theatre critic. Like, I was in plays in school. That's about it. Not to brag or anything, but in our Burford secondary school...
You seem like such a wallflower. You seem like such a shrinking violet type. I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, I mean, I was poor person / convict / worker in a production of Les Mis, so
Yes.
And you hear the people sing.
There can't be any struggle without those characters in the background. Then we understand, he doesn't want to go back to that. Otherwise, we would be confused. You helped enhance the world.
You were one of the miserables.
You were one of the miserables.
I was. In fact, I, to my everlasting shame and cringing regret, I came up with a backstory for my nameless character. Like, I pretended like the various extras I was in fact one character that was going on a journey of his own. And no, I don't think that's what the original writers had in mind. But you know what? I took that role and I made it my own, and that's why I was in 13 out of 30 scenes. Yeah!
Boom.
But the point
alto, bass, baritone. Where did you?
I was sort of
tenor. Where did you fall?
I mean, I was like 14, so I was a tenor. Now I'm a bit more of a bass.
That's right.
I had one solo singing line. What was it? Something for a crust of bread in holy Jesus' name, and that's it. Just other than that, just me in the background. But I nailed it. I fucking nailed it. Anyway, the reason why I bring this up...
We believed you wanted bread.
Believed you wanted bread.
That's right. We bought it. You're like, yes, that kid needs bread. Give him some bread. What's wrong with you?
The reason why I bring this up is because I don't have a great critical eye for plays and for musicals. I mean, the last musical I didn't even see it. I listened to it online. It's a parody of Hamilton based around a very popular Dungeons and Dragons Twitch show called Critical Role. I don't know if you guys are familiar, and I just...
Yes,
I am.
So there's a musical based on that. And it's a fucking amazing...
The Critical Role guys did?
Sorry?
The Critical Role guys did it, or this fans?
Just fans. And it's the whole thing. The whole fucking thing. Literally, the first song is like, Scandal short-hold, I'm a gnome. Yeah, Scandal short-hold, I'm a gnome. And there's a million chicks I haven't boned. But just you wait. Just you wait. And that's the whole thing. It's fucking amazing. So that's where I'm at. That's the level of my knowledge. So I'm really glad I got to listen to it on the Broadway Podcast Network. I was unaware there was a Broadway Podcast Network.
Oh.
I know. Yeah, most of their podcasts are actually podcasts about Broadway,
And they have a lot of humorous ones too.
and mm-hmm. we're the rare dramatic, this is a play, but audio only kind of situation.
Well, and they have some serialized work, but it is comedy, or they have a soap opera called As the Curtain Rises, I think. And they also I got into them before we found this to be such a exciting project to work on with them. It's called Bleeding Love. It's a post-apocalyptic musical that was about to happen, and then it got made as an audio drama, and it's so great as an audio drama. And so I get really sucked in by that. And my friend David Zelnick, a playwright, he did Loveville, and which premiered there too. So I was really aware that musicals were working really well in the audio format. It's something I've been really interested in.
And what's cool is that one of the heads of Broadway Podcast Network, Dory Bernstein, told us in our initial meeting what's cool and why she was sort of attracted to the King Kirby material in the first place was that for years her office was down the hall from Steve Ditko's studio, the famously reclusive co-creator of Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. And if you've seen Jonathan Ross's great documentary about Ditko that I think he did for the BBC, where he and Neil Gaiman go over and try to go to Steve Ditko's office, that I think is the building where her offices were in. So she was sort of interested in this material to begin with. So it was sort of a natural, partnership.
It's fantastic. And it's interesting, though, that you say there haven't been that many done on the Broadway Podcast Network, because over here in the UK, audio dramas are a huge deal. We're constantly releasing audio books. They're still on the radio. BBC Radio 4 still do audio plays. Sure. And so I've listened, there's plenty of like Doctor Who audio dramas that I think outnumber the amount of TV episodes at this point. So it's really cool that America is catching up, especially because it's also using that platform in a very positive way, because before each episode of King Kirby, there's a little ad for BetterHelp.com, which is a service that provides online counseling for people who really need it, which is something that I wasn't aware existed, and I'm very glad to learn of.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just, like you said, you feel like you're in someone's head, or you're having a relationship with a character in a whole new way that you can imagine. So I feel like the experience of, I'm working on a few scripted audio dramas as well. And in listening to the ones that I've gotten into recently, like there's this Girl in Space one, and I'm really into Sage and Savant, and In Strange Woods is actually a musical one, which is really great. You feel like you're not alone. You feel like and so at a time where we're isolated, it's always been wonderful. And I think that's why people listen to them on commutes and so forth, to feel a little less alone, and just, have some literature in your head, where you get to dream. But it's really, really therapeutic. It almost helps you breathe a little bit and like relax, and because you're going into a story. And so you come out of the story a little lifted, and then you can go into whatever your day is going to be in the pandemic, which is, getting better, but it's definitely still a pandemic.
Yeah. And the great thing with audio dramas is you can set your own pace. I mean, King Kirby is a relatively short play. That's why it's only spread over for relatively short episodes. But you can go at that at whatever speed you want. And considering you're covering his whole life, that's a really cool thing to do. And the cast does a fantastic fucking job. So let's talk about them for a second. Like I say, they're reprising their roles from the play. So we've got Stephen Rattazzi as Jack Kirby. Am I saying that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, you got it.
He's fantastic. They're all fantastic. We've also got Amy Lee Purcell, Nat Cassidy, Joseph Mathers, and Timothy McCowan Reynolds. And so Nat Cassidy's playing Stanley. Amy Lee Purcell is Roz Kirby. Joseph Mathers, Joe Simon, Timothy McCowan Reynolds, Martin Goodman. And these are some of the biggest figures in Jack Kirby's life at that point.
Right. And I should point out that other than Steven, the other four all play a billion other characters. They're like the Simpsons cast. They keep, popping in and out of various roles.
Like in episode 2, you're listening to Timothy.
Yeah,
play
as
Patton.
So Tim Reynolds plays all of the kind of the bosses in Jack's life. So he's Victor Fox, the original king of the comics, Martin Goodman, Jack Leibowitz, and Patton, who Kirby notoriously despised, and many think that Darkseid is partly based on
Patton.
On Patton.
That would not fucking surprise me. That's Patton, Darkseid seem to go hand in hand. And it's fascinating to mention that because I'm assuming they double up the roles on stage as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, Steven is the only person who only has to play one person. Although he has to play that person from the ages of 6 to 80. So it's quite a challenge.
And Holly Ryan.
It's the stage.
Mirabal.
You can do that.
Do that. Well, the costume designers who I'm gonna I have our King Kirby Insta is King Kirby Play, and we're putting out a lot of goodies. We're on Twitter, same thing, and Facebook, same thing. But the costume designers Holly Wren and Meryl Pressman did a fantastic job really making each look iconic. So I myself, when I name the cast, I get confused and I always go, wait, am I forgetting someone? Because it sounds like there's, even on stage, it felt like there was an ensemble of 10 people. Like it's startling that it's only 5 people. It's really, and that's my favorite kind of work. Another favorite play of mine is Indecent, or, I love ensemble.
Steven was also in
Curious Incidents, also a huge thing that I play. I love.
What do you think of Anomalisa?
Yeah. Anomalisa, what's that? How do I not know what that is?
Okay, so I knew of it as a movie from one of my favorite filmmakers, Charlie Kaufman, but it's supposedly based on a play, but it's only 3 actors in it. And is
this the claymation one?
I don't really think it's claymation, but it's definitely stop motion animated.
Motion, right? Yes, no, that has been on my list for some time, and my friend was just talking about it. Yeah, no, I have to see that. I didn't realize it was based on a play. Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
I didn't either. I just, as soon as I saw it, I thought, okay, research time. Let's find out what the backstory behind this madness is. So it's really fascinating. But the reason why I bring up the cast, aside from getting to talk about the cast, is because I want to ask what was it like for them going from stage acting to voice acting in an audio drama podcast? Because those are 2 very different styles.
Well, because this was a black box production where you kind of had to use your imagination to sort of jump from the Lower East Side to the offices of DC Comics to war-torn France and so on. A lot of those were vocal performances for the most part anyway, since we didn't have a lot of costumes or anything. And you knew it was the same guy you just saw before, 2 scenes before. It's totally different part. We were trying to disguise it all. So in other words, they'd already kind of put in the work to do that stuff. So I think it was very natural. And don't forget, it was almost like, because they had done it for all these performances on stage, they already knew it down. They already had it down, right? They already had it locked. So they just kind of had to say it. And it was, I think, supernatural.
Well, it's true to the ensemble form in that the costumes really elevate it and give it a look. But they're each character they brought on had a different physical stature, a different sound, a different, even though the role was small. Clearly, they trained with, understanding that they had to sell, that they needed a piece of bread, even if it was one lyric, one line. That's a distinct character, just like the work you were doing in Les Mis. But they really...
We're the same.
Right, exactly, right? It's the same thing. But they really were quite, exceptional in the show, which really, interestingly enough, only had 8 performances sold out in this festival. And then not a few weeks later, but very shortly after, we ended up recording in an actual comic book shop, and they just kind of brought all of that to them. I think that also, they are do a lot of voice work themselves, but there was just this energy with Steven, who is the voice of Dr. Orpheus in the Venture Brothers. And there was something about the way he grabbed that mic and just kind of was in it. And then you could feel the energy in the room all shift. And they were like, oh yeah, this is audio. And you could just see them go into it. And it was just really exciting. It was the second take though, Fred. You did remind me that the other day.
Yeah, we did it the month before my friend offered to tape it, but then somehow managed to screw. I can't remember how he managed to. Nice guy, don't get me wrong. Works for Image Comics now, but yeah, that was a total wash. So thank God the cast was generous enough. We actually bought him a really nice dinner beforehand before we went to Midtown Comics. It's sort of a thank you for doing this. We're sorry about when we keep making you do this crazy shit. But yeah, the second time was the charm.
It paid dividends because listening to this show all the time, I'm just thinking,
Oh my God, he's so goddamn cool!
It's the performance that sells it. Because I mentioned earlier Kirby's worldview, but also just because, again, a lot of it is down to the acting, but also the sound mixing. Just because it feels like he's right in your ear. Maybe it's because I've got these brand new, spanking new headphones, but it really. I'm trying to best how to put it into words. It's one of those performances, and indeed one of those stories, where I feel myself becoming just a soundboard for these characters. I am becoming a human mirror, and they are me, and I am them, and we are all together. It's kind of scary in a way, but in a fantastic sort of way, because this is a really interesting story. And you keep on saying, you said it's true, and I believe you, but because
when I lie to you, person I just met today,
because the whole writer-artist recognition in terms of money and credit and everything is a battle that in many respects is still being waged today. And so you sort of. It's been a long road, and it really
legally it's settled.
Legally, but it started back then. He was at the forefront of it, and
right.
And just listening to Stephen talk about in Jack's voice about the stuff that he liked, the art he liked, and moving forward, taking that and putting it into a career is truly fascinating. And I think that's the lack of recognition, which is a center point for the story, is perfectly exemplified. And I'm not going to go too heavy into spoilers, or I'm not going to go heavy into spoilers at all, because I want people to go and listen to this. But
into history, but yeah.
It's perfectly exemplified in the very beginning of the first episode with the Sotheby's auction, where the auctioneer doesn't have a clue about comics and is really misrepresenting it. And I just wanted to reach in through my laptop and just strangle, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Show some goddamn respect.
That's right. That's the second best performance of Amy Lee Purcell in the show, next to Roz. Is I love her as the auctioneer.
Oh, really? I love her as the auctioneer, but I also, my favorite Amy character that Amy does that isn't Roz is watch for the comic seal of approval.
That's right. Well, that had spoilers. That hasn't happened yet.
It's his third one.
That's episode 3.
When we get into Dr. Wortham, who you're about to meet in the third episode, and his threat to comics. But she has a comics code enforcer role, which is amazing.
Those notoriously easygoing and not draconian people.
Right. Well, yeah, what was cool was that the what you don't get from the audio drama, obviously, is that the way we did it in the Comic Book Theater Festival is that Steve was on stage as the audience came into the theater, and his back was to the audience, and he was at a drawing table drawing. And so that whole auction scene, I think it works fine in the context of the audio drama. On stage, that whole scene with the auctioneer, Kirby is just sitting there drawing the whole time until suddenly he breaks in and starts interrupting her, sort of from beyond the grave, right? Because the Sotheby's auction happens after he's passed. So, but it works well. It works really well in audio drama.
Well, it's that sound of him drawing. You get really, like you said, you feel like he's in your ear. You get very connected to him and his voice, and so it works similarly in that in the stage production, you're connected to that visual, and in the audio drama, it's the sound. And Bobby Cronin did a great job. As well, getting the internal feeling of Kirby. And that was something I felt passionate that the soundtrack should not be of the period, that it should reflect superhero imagination and thrill and excitement, like how he felt when he was creating these things, and how we feel when we watch an Avengers film today and we hear this great score come on, or Spider-Man's leaping buildings. And so I really, I'm so proud that he really captured that moment. The moment that Fred's talking about, with him sitting there at the desk drawing and coming in, it really was an incredible thing to see the audience experience it, because some didn't know the story at all, and didn't really even think about who made what was on their t-shirts or lunch boxes, or they just had accepted, oh, those are just awesome images. And then there was a other half of the audience that came because Kirby's story was so rarely told, and not told in this way. And so there was one woman who was doing a thesis, and it really was moving, and she saw Stephen, this moment that Fred's describing, and she burst into tears. And it was because she had been writing so much about him, and she's an artist, and she wants to be like him, and it just was a lot for her. She was like, she felt like she was there with him. And that's what theater is meant to do. Theater in some way is meant to be like a church, and like or some kind of ritual. And that's how you feel in audio drama too. You're here as part of this experience. So we're just so glad that it's all translating, and that you got that feeling too, that you felt like you were there with him, going on this journey.
It's an emotional journey. I think that's what any good play and any good story really does. Really gets you wrapped up in the emotion of the moment. And it really hit me right after that bit where he sort of cuts off the auction right as she's about to say how much his work is actually worth. And the line, I think that will stick with me for a very long time, that he says is, "Nothing's worse than hearing what you're worth after you're gone." Yeah.
That was me. I thought that was you.
That one's yours.
I thought, oh, well, maybe we did it together. I don't remember, but it's a good line.
It is a good line.
It's a fantastic line. This whole story's full of them, and it's full of it's full of emotion, like we say, and it's full of this sense of wonder, the sense of spectacle, going right back to when he's a kid and he's drawing on the walls of his apartment building. There was his dad. It's really fascinating. One question I have that I have to ask is, okay, so his boss, when he was working for Fox, said that he hit upon the formula for success in comics: a big explosion on the third panel on the first page. That has to be true.
Yeah, most of that scene at Fox is taken directly from Joe Simon's autobiography, The Comic Book Makers. Yeah. And so all that stuff, the line about him knowing a whore in Syracuse, and they said she was the best whore in town, but he wasn't impressed. It's a small town. Like, all that is something Joe Simon talked about in his. I mean, the best Victor Fox story doesn't even really make it into the play, because it doesn't actually involve Jack Kirby or Joe Simon at all, which is that the legend about Victor Fox was that he was the accountant of DC Comics. So when he saw the sales figures from Action Comics, the first appearance of Superman coming in, that's when he quit and founded his own comics company and started cranking out superhero comics. So he was one of the first ones on the scene. Turns out that legend's probably not true. In fact, he probably just had the same offices in DC, but he actually opened his offices in the same building at DC. So confused artists and writers would show up thinking they were going to have a meeting at DC, but in fact, they were being directed to Fox, this completely different fly-by-night place run by this crazy person. And he actually got Will Eisner, of all people, to do this rip-off character called Wonder Man. And he ended up getting sued by DC. And it was and that's actually how Jack Kirby ended up working for Fox, was that Jack Kirby started out working for Will Eisner, which is also something, unfortunately, we weren't able to get into in the play. It was a festival, so we were contracted to deliver a 75-minute script. The podcast is longer, though. Anyway, so to make a long story short, too late, Victor Fox poached Jack Kirby from Will Eisner because he hated Will Eisner and was trying to steal all Will Eisner's artists, and the main one he got was Jack, and then Joe Simon later shows up.
I mean, that
in the
whole
expanded
time,
version.
I look forward to the eventual movie where you can go into more detail.
Exactly.
Yes. And there was something, I think that the more we talk about it, there's something about being around original art for so long in my life, whether it was seeing Art Spiegelman's work with Mouse at MoMA, or, as I got to know Fred, we would be having dinner with other comic book creators, and there on the wall would be the incredible original art. And I remember seeing Will Eisner's original art too at the MoCA, which was around for a bit, Museum of Comic Book and Cartoon Art. And it's really transformative when you actually stand in front of the actual pages and you actually see, you can see the labor in a way that's so different, and it's incredibly moving.
I mean, it's like looking at Da Vinci sketches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky to have dinner with Walt Simonson and Louise Simonson a while back, and Walt has that. There's a famous splash at the very end of New Gods #1 that introduces Darkseid, and that's on in his dining room, the original of that. And being near that was pretty neat. He has a Mike Mignola drawing of Wolverine fighting dinosaurs in his bathroom. So the Simonson house, yeah. So the Simonson's household is sort of a museum where you can have dinner.
I have a drawing from Why the Last Man and a drawing of Psylocke that was done by a friend of mine in university, and more recently a picture done. Same thing. And more recently, a picture drawn by a friend of the show, Lyndon White, who's a very talented writer and artist, commemorating one of Podcapus' specials, which was one of our Dungeons and Dragons episodes. That's what I've got. That's all. It's the same, as you say.
That's right. It's the same.
And so
it's so interesting. I was working with Stephen as an actor, but we have from a storyboard, we have his Dr. Orpheus, a sketch of Dr. Orpheus.
That's right. We do have the sketch at New York Comic Con. I was tabling next to the guy who did the storyboards for the Venture Brothers, and I bought off him for her, because this is before we even met Stephen, I should point out. So this was very much kismet. I have the storyboard of this first pan up when Dr. Orpheus is first introduced in the Venture Brothers, and yet somehow we never remembered to get Steve to sign it. We have to take it out of the frame.
The storyboard artist needed it.
We know Stephen. We don't need to prove it with his signature. Jeez.
Absolutely. I mean, this is also another aspect of something that the story is tackling, King Kirby's tackling, this idea back in the day of comic book art being highly manufactured, or at least it was viewed as manufactured art.
Well, the idea that, and this is something obviously the auctioneer says in the show, is that this idea that it's commercial art, and therefore that was a very 20th century idea, right? Is that the artists of commercial art subtracted themselves. There's, the art is fundamentally valueless because it's not like, personal. It's sort of the whole auteur theory, right? Is that if the art doesn't somehow have a deep expression of the artist's personality or soul, which is of course not to say that Jack Kirby's art doesn't do that, but if it wasn't, if it was, you made it to make money, which is, dumbest thing, which is the worst argument against anything of all time. We do live in a capitalist society.
We've got to have money.
Anytime someone mentions money, I have to put a clip.
On board. Fair enough. Duly noted. It's I completely lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I blame society.
I think I made my point though. It's all right. It's all good. That's what the soundboard is there for.
Sometimes it happens in the pandemic with the pandemic brain. It fizzles out a little.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never understood that, because, I did not grow up looking at Rembrandts and all these sort of things. There's a phrase I think comes up a couple of times in the story. It's my art was comic book art. When I was 7 years old, I was flipping through Jack Kirby's work on Spider-Man and all these other sorts of things, and Steve Ditko, and because I had talked about before on the show, I had these reprints of Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and things like that called Marvel Essentials, and it was literally just black and white reprints, and you got like newspaper ink.
Sure, I got a bunch.
They were really cool, but I was reading that at 7 years old. That's what has informed my artistic viewpoint, and I could just imagine a bunch of people, again, comic book artists, in that auction scene, just staring at this person in disbelief. And I don't know if it's just a generational thing or a perspective thing, but I always love it when stories like this explain why his art and the art of so many others had real, genuine value. Beyond monetary value, it had creative value.
Right. I totally agree.
Because he... again, going from the story, he worked so fucking hard.
Right. And was ridiculously fast. We brought up Les Mis obviously earlier. What I often think of like Valjean, right? Who's this character in Hugo who for whatever reason has superhuman strength. Like it's just something, he doesn't know how to explain it. It's the fact of the character. And Kirby had the superhuman speed when it came to drawing. And, these days, having worked in comics for 15 years, you're happy when you get a page every 2 days out of somebody. Kirby, at the height of Kirby's power in the mid Marvel years, he was cranking out 9 pages a day. So he was head and shoulders above everybody else.
And he was an observer. I think that, he really saw.
Yeah.
He was a machine. And I think also like, from those early days of the fights in the Lower East Side and all these things and being a part of action, he was just really studying in a way movement as it was happening. He just had this instinct, this talent that when he began to draw, because if you watch him drawing, it feels like it's pouring out of him in a very interesting way. And some of our favorite artists, I've definitely seen them labor much more over, framework and, angles and where things should go. And, again, I'm only seeing maybe some select things of Kirby, but it does feel like instinctually he had a great instinct for action and power dynamics between characters and just visually telling the story. Like the words that's what's so interesting about this conversation about Stan with the words and Kirby with the drawing, because in the Marvel method, the pages are drawn first. So he's telling the story and you don't actually need the dialogue to follow the story. So and he also makes the point later about Stan even being inspired by some of the things he was writing on those storyboards himself. So, creating and drawing is writing. It's telling the story. So there's a lot that you'll discover in the next few episodes of that debate getting more and more heightened.
Speaking of which, when can we hope to listen to the remaining episodes?
They roll out every Wednesday until we run out of them. So the next one will be on Wednesday, the 24th. And there's a 5th episode that's going to be a very fun, informative roundtable of me and Crystal and the entire cast and Bobby Cronin, who wrote all the music and did such a great job with the sound design and editing.
I mean, you're spoiling us at this point. He's giving me so much content. Yes!
But you know what? You deserve it.
You do. We have some behind the scenes things that we're rolling out on social media and a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Crystal's manning the Instagram.
It's a little much, but I enjoy it.
Well, we thank you for it, and I'll be providing links in the show note capers. So when you're done listening to this episode on Wednesday, you can go and listen to their episodes on Wednesday. We're feeding into each other. Synergy. I love it.
That's right. And you can get them on iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also listen directly on the Broadway Podcast Network.com page.
Yep. And we, for the extra goodies, it's always King Kirby Play on Instagram, Twitter, and I believe soon Facebook. I just made that one.
So you've got no excuse, capers. You've got plenty of avenues to go down. Go out and check out this audio play because it's so cool. And I literally, this just popped into my head. The way this is all put together and presented, it feels like, and maybe this is just me, maybe it's just how my brain works. This feels like the audio equivalent of Kirby's eponymous art style, the Kirby Crackle. Just this lush, vibrant experience that just passes through your brain and fizzes up inside your mind. I absolutely love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And on that note, I think we're going to end the show. So thank you so much, Fred and Crystal, for coming and talking with me today.
Thanks for having us.
We loved it. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
thank you. A good night for you and a lovely afternoon for us.
I'm so glad you had a good time. Now, just to let you know, Capers, Pod Capers is going to be off next week because I am moving house. I am moving back up from Oxfordshire to Edinburgh, so we won't be able to do the episode due to moving shenanigans, but week after, we're back to our usual schedule. Try not to cry too hard. But on that note, I think we're going to end the show. Thank you very much again, guys, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And if you enjoy the show, Capers, please tell your friends. Shout it from the rooftops. And if you haven't already, go back and listen to some of our other super episodes. Like all the times we talked about Marvel and people like that before. You've got plenty to choose from. You can listen to the show on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at podcapers.com. If you want to get in touch with us, suggest show topics, or maybe come on the show yourself, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AP2HYC. Thank you very much to Dan Harris for our logo, the lovely microphone, the red and blue 3D glasses. Those are mine. And thank you for listening. This has been Pod Capers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. Cue the music!